Hey everyone, welcome to a TopSoil webinar. It's been a little while since we've done one of these. Been kind of a busy summer and a lot of moving parts that have been going on. So excited to get dug back into these. My name is Mitchell Hora. I'm the founder and CEO here at Continuumag, and I'm a seventh generation farmer. I'm just trying to continue to navigate what are the opportunities that are out there in the ag industry. We need all the opportunities we can get with 380 corn and $9, $9.50 soybeans, or 980 soybeans, whatever. Hopefully a little bit better. I haven't looked here today, but anyway, the ag sector is continuing to look for opportunities. We need to continue to drive the adoption of soil health practices, and that's what we're all about here at Continuum Ag, trying to help family farms be profitable from improving their soil health. And one of those things we've been looking at, of course, is the 45Z tax credit. A lot of you, of course, are following us because we've been really trying to figure that out. I think it's going to be could be a big opportunity for my family farm and likely for the ag and biofuel industry as a whole. We don't know all the details yet, and you'll hear that throughout the conversation here with Faith and myself. But things are getting closer and closer every day, and I'm still very optimistic that things are going to work out and be positive for the farmers here. So we'll find out. We'll see how it all works. But in my mind, all this boils down to educating ourselves, having good data. It all takes data, and I think we're gonna hear that from Faith here today. That it's not just data on the farm, but all the way through the whole chain. So, hoping to get some good insights here today. And Faith and I have had a lot of awesome conversations. Faith, want to thank you for hopping on, and thank you for our friendship as well. It's been awesome. We've had some great times. And it's just been super welcoming, to me as well. And I've been, especially at some of these, events when I met you first couple years ago, just super welcoming and open, as I was the kind of the new young guy around some of these things, not really knowing anybody. We've had some awesome conversations and time together. So anyway, Faith is we've had you guys in and around before, and some of your colleagues have spoken at our Topsoil Summit for anyone that's been around at that. But Faith is with Mickelson Co. I'm going to let her explain who she is and what Mickelson Co. is. But essentially, they are the guys that are helping to broker the tax credits between the ethanol plant and the buyers. And they do other tax credits as well, right? It's not just in biofuel. There's a lot of different things out there. I'll let her explain it. She's the expert. I am not. But what I think is important here is, as farmers, as agriculturalists, folks helping the biofuel producers, if if this 45Z program is going to work out, there's got to be cash coming into the system and cash exchanged at some points. We don't know how all that's going to work out, but we're developing tax credits here, and from my understanding, uh, there's an appetite for these. So anyway, we're going to talk about that. Excited to dig in, but I'm going to stop sharing just so everyone can just see us. As we go here, just toss your questions in the chat. This is just going to be open chit chat between us. So excited to take your questions. Just pop them in the Q&A function. We'll try to get to as much as we can. But Faith, without further ado, I really appreciate you taking the time. I'll toss it over to you. Introduce yourself and a little bit, on Mickelson Co. high level.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Mitchell, and thanks for having me. We always love to participate with Continuum Ag in these kind of forums and settings. Our team has had the great fortune of attending the summits at the farm, which we also enjoy, and it's been great to just meet many of you in person at those events. It really kind of creates those relationships and kind of strengthens bonds, and so we can be out in the market to see how things are really working. But it's a pleasure to be here. So I lead the renewable practice for Mickelson and Company. We are tax credit brokers. So all we do is transferable tax credits. We have been in operation for 20 years. And we also do a lot of work and support the railroad industry, the short lines, class 2 and class 3, many supporting obviously commodities and grains movement across the country. And with the onset of the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022, we started a renewable energy practice, and we are located in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So we're kind of in the heart of agriculture, heart of ethanol. And many of us, while we're mostly lawyers and CPAs because we do tax credits.
Yeah.
We also have very strong agricultural ties and backgrounds and professional experience in the space.
Mhm.
And so it's a natural fit for us to help participate there. So obviously the Section 45Z tax credit that we're here to discuss today really became effective as of January 1st this year. Prior to that, we had been doing a lot of investment tax credit sales to
Mhm.
corporate buyers, still to support the biofuels industry. Those types of projects that qualify for investment tax credits are the things that are always top of mind for us, which would be solar projects, wind projects,
Sure.
battery storage, hydropower, but also particular to the biofuels industry would be anaerobic digesters that are placed on, dairy, beef, cattle, swine operations, landfill gas, wastewater treatment facilities. And so we do a lot of that. And really our practice is probably largely comprised of dairy operations. And we've also done combined heat and power tax credits. So those, if you install at an ethanol facility, and there's other applications that use CHPs in a microgrid capacity, those qualified for an investment tax credit. So that's how we started assisting in biofuels. And now we are really in the 45Z market, and those 45Z tax credits are being sold.
Yeah.
We are basically these who buys a corporate tax credit, which we can get into later, is a usually a corporation who has a tax liability. They purchase the credit at a discount to use against their federal tax bill. So we'll stop there. We can get into more into it,
Yeah.
but that's kind of a brief overview of our firm.
Tons of angles that we can kind of go with this, right? And I don't want to get things too confused on all these different types of credits, but what's important, as I've learned about this space, like, wow, this is like a whole new big industry and big opportunity, right? And I think one of the questions that I think I asked you at some point or dug into at some point is like, man, there's a lot of different tax credits coming into the market. At some point, are we going to dilute the market, or like, is there way more demand than there is supply? And do we have any concerns about there becoming a lot of supply of tax credits and gobbling up the demand?
Mhm. Well, it's an excellent question, and there's a few different factors kind of for how that play into that.
Yeah.
So first on the tax credit side, to your point, Mitchell, all of these credits, including Section 45Z, were contemplated as part of that Inflation Reduction Act in
Right.
2022.
Right.
Now we have the, OBBBA, the big beautiful bill
Yeah.
that had been passed into law. So that reconciliation bill made adjustments to those early 2022 tax credits. They all had been contemplated, though, a certain life
Sure.
or a period in which the credits were available.
Yeah.
And there's certain requirements for what you have to do in order to qualify or safe harbor a project, let's say on the investment tax credit side, to where you would have the ability to still earn the tax credit. The Section 45Z was always slated to begin this year. Now we know with the reconciliation bill that that some of those tax credits, particularly wind and solar, were peeled back a bit. They
Right.
still have a runway. They still
But they're
many
going to
of those
sunset
original
earlier, right? Is that kind of the right?
they still and have restrictions on
Okay,
how
they
they
will. Sure.
qualify from a
Sure.
beginning of
Okay.
construction. So yes, they have kind of those have been scaled back, but all the other credits are still kind of into a 2032 time range for a window.
Sure.
And then the 45Zs had an extension. And then we know through the process, as this bill was created, the scoring or kind of what is the size
Mhm.
of this credit.
Yeah.
And really the GREET model there's been favorable treatment, and we expect further favorable treatment starting in 2026 with
Mhm.
the regulations and a new updated Argonne GREET model. What's applicable here would be removal of the penalty for indirect land use.
Yeah.
And we can get into that at some point, but at a high level, that's one component. So the credits have always kind of been contemplated and available. And
Because
obviously
the
collective,
indirect land use one, that does start on only on the 2026 credits, right? So not on the
correct.
2025 credit. And
Yep.
an important thing for everyone here, that would be for fuel produced in 2026, right? So crop in
Correct.
25 or feedstock in 25 going into biofuel of 2026, you'll see that reduction. So yeah, there may be less of the ethanol plants that'll very readily qualify on their 2025 production. A lot of them still very
Yeah.
likely will, but
Mhm.
in 2026 there'll be a lot more plants that will really be able to jump into it. So that's your 2025 crop that we're about ready to harvest now, going into 2026. Now, of course, we still don't know about the feedstock, right? I need to
Yeah,
point.
and that, yeah, I would say the
That's
indirect land use, that won't be even, you don't even
that's not
have,
a
there's
farmer piece at
no
all.
application to feedstock at all.
That's right.
It's just corn, let's say. And because of whether it's corn or beans on the biodiesel R&D side,
Yep.
the penalty was more, it's not used as food, right? But for fuel. And so
Yeah.
that was just a score within Argonne Great. Now that penalty will be removed just simply as those two, whether it's corn or beans, they will not receive the penalty for biofuels, which will bring CI scores down, maybe in a range of 5 to 7 points. Don't hold me to that because we have to
Yeah.
wait to see the model. But that's something that's favorable.
Yeah.
And I would say going back to kind of the question at hand is, will there be a glut of these credits? Um, so there's always been contemplated this many credits to be consumed by a US federal tax bill. And so you can kind of find the data, and I don't have the number in front of me of what in the aggregate a US federal tax liability for corporate taxpayers might be.
Sure.
That the other factor is the reconciliation bill had significant favorable tax treatment that would reduce other areas that would come in to reduce a corporate taxpayer's tax
Sure.
liability.
Sure. So just reducing then their interest in buying somebody else's tax credits because their tax liability was just lowered from the start.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say interest, they have the interest, but the capacity for the dollar amount they can
So
purchase
the
in
appetite
some
for it
cases
is down.
may have exactly may
Sure.
be reduced. So we've had a bit of the market, the 45Z market really has just started to get going, and there were lots of reasons at the beginning of one, people wanted to see and wait, which is the right thing, right? How will the bill address Section 45Z? No one wants to do something prematurely, so the market kind of held off.
Yeah.
And then really corporate buyers and the folks who makes the decision to purchase a tax credit. Let's start there. The person who oversees the tax preparation at a corporation, an executive overseeing tax, a vice president of tax, or maybe the CFO, depending on the size, maybe the treasury group. But it's any company that has a US federal tax bill, and the folks on that tax and finance team are making the decision. Once the bill was enacted into law, they had to go and reforecast their 2025 tax liability to account for all of the other changes and that
Sure.
favorable tax treatment they received in the bill. So over the last kind of couple months or month, 6 weeks, we have seen them take pause to say, we actually have to reassess that
Sure.
forecast.
Sure. Makes
Now
sense.
that's been happened, and now the market is moving.
It's
And
kind of
so
like we
we're
run,
educating buyers.
our anticipated taxes, right? You can run an estimate on what you believe your tax liability is going to be. That's what they've got to redo and figure out what their appetite is. Then come back to the bargaining
Yes.
table, I suppose, saying, okay, here's how much we're actually interested in purchasing because here's how much tax liability we believe we're going to have. Now, the
Yes.
question in the Q&A from anonymous attendee, it asked about where that demand is coming from, and is it a likening to an actual compulsory market, like in some of these carbon credit markets where there's actually like a driven demand for that, or is it all voluntary? My understanding, this is all voluntary. It's just companies that you can either pay the federal government all the taxes that you owe, or you could buy a tax credit for likely a bit of a discount, of course. So instead of pay $1 to the government, pay 90 cents or whatever the average going is now, pay 90 cents over to somebody else who developed the tax credit and you save yourself the difference, right? Is that kind of just the general
That's
of
right.
it?
Yep. It's only, nobody has to do this. This is a market tax credits have been around for a very long time. Either you can earn a tax credit yourself depending on, we've always had low income housing or historic tax credits or new markets, or there's a numbers of types of credits.
Yeah,
Another piece of now a corporate's strategy or tax planning strategy is they can elect, nobody's required to do anything as part of their strategy. If they say, you know what, this is something that makes sense for us,
sure.
we'd like to purchase transferable tax credits as our overall strategy and how we manage our tax liability on an annual basis.
And,
And so it's those corporate buyers who are like, yeah, that's interesting to us. And we think it's a really good value proposition and an opportunity.
well,
We
in my
try to
understanding too,
yeah.
they could buy them as this gets going, right? They'll be able to kind of buy them on a quarterly or rolling basis. So it's like, hey, I bought some of the tax credits, so rather than pay my quarterly estimate, I so instead of say a $10 million in your estimate in your quarterly estimate, so instead of paying $10 million to the federal government on my quarterly estimate, I could buy $10 million worth of tax credits for nine million dollars, right? At a call it a 10%
Mhm.
discount, save that $1 million, reinvest it back in the company because I that $1 million I basically just retained now. And so I'm able to reinvest that money back in my company quicker than just on an annual basis. But there's a bit of a play here even quarterly, I think, isn't there? I know you have to
Right.
report it at the end, but and you got to have a true up and you got to make sure that your estimate, it's an estimate until it's trued up at the end. But is that like a
Right.
really big opportunity for them and why they're like kind of wanting to get going on it early?
Yeah, so usually a corporation is typically making an estimated payment
Sure.
on a quarterly basis to the IRS. If you're a calendar year taxpayer, you're making that estimated payment on April 15, June 15, September 15, and December 15. And
Sure.
so you owe, and we won't get into the detail of how those estimates are determined. There's elections you can make with the IRS. But at the end of the day, a corporation is knows what they're making for their estimated payment. And so it's beneficial for a purchaser of a tax credit to actually pay for that tax credit at the same time they plan to use their cash to pay the IRS anyway. They're going to pay the money regardless.
Sure.
And so it's tax planning, but it's also treasury or effective utilization of your cash on hand. And so let's say in a Section 45Z scenario, you're earning the credit as you're producing the gallon of biofuel. So a corporate buyer would say, hey, it's great for me. I've estimated, and we work with the buyer, we place an appropriate sized credit with a buyer who has a liability and to where it would make sense.
Yeah.
And it's important to note a buyer can buy up to 75% of their overall tax liability in the form of a credit.
Oh,
So
interesting.
we work with the buyer and
You
assess
can't
what
a
is your
hundred percent not pay the federal government and only buy tax credits. You can buy up to 75%.
right.
That's interesting. Now I didn't know that.
So
And
they will look at certain, like we'll say, we can deliver, here's what's been produced on a certain time period. We have to deliver the required documentation that would be necessary for a corporate buyer to say, I feel comfortable. This qualifies for a Section 45Z.
yeah,
That's documentation from your CPA, your third
yeah,
party verifier. You have to meet prevailing wage and apprenticeship, these standards.
yeah,
And then that corporate buyer is saying, great, you've shown me this time period of data. You've complied and you've qualified for the credit. I will pay for that portion of the gallons you produce to generate a certain dollar amount of Section 45Z credits.
yeah,
On April 15th, I would love if I'm going to pay the IRS $100, I may pay you $92 for a $100 tax credit.
yep,
And I get to realize $8 of profit margin. But it's the time value of money as well, because the
sure.
cash isn't going out earlier to purchase it. We're typically aligning that timing to where you
Yeah,
can
they were going to
maximize
spend the
the
money anyway.
value.
Yeah,
Yep, you can maximize the price paid and you maximize value to the buyer of the
it
credit.
seems like a no-brainer on the tax credit buyer side, but what are they looking for, right? So they've got to have some assurance or like some paperwork or some proof that this is legit, right? Like, what are they looking for? And does the CPA firm have to be involved right now, or like, how does that process
Mhm.
go, right? Because they're not just gonna spend the money for nothing if they don't know for certain that the tax
No.
credit's real, right? So what does that look like?
Yeah, what we refer to, it's typically CPA firms, and that's largely who's providing this documentation.
Yep.
Law firms can provide it, but are you meeting the requirements of the statute or the law to generate your 45Z credit? So are you a qualified biofuels producer? Are you a qualified facility? Ethanol, renewable natural gas, biodiesel, renewable diesel. What is produced has to be suitable for use as a transportation fuel to qualify.
Sure.
So you also, these facilities that qualify, ethanol, you have to start and maintain requirements for how you're paying your employees and
Yeah.
subcontractors to ensure subcontractors are paying employees at a certain level. That's called prevailing wage and apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Those requirements have to be met and documented that a facility is qualifying there. So that flows into what I'm calling a tax credit eligibility memo drafted by a CPA firm.
Okay.
You also have to have a third party verifier. Those similar people to who are doing LCFS work now, they've come in to verify what is actually the driver of the range that you're going to earn on a per gallon basis of the
Sure.
dollar amount to calculate your 45Z, and that's who's going to verify that carbon intensity score.
Yeah. And
That
that's what
flows
we
into the
work a
tax
lot
credit.
with. Folks here have heard me talk about what we do with eco engineers or Christensen's or SES.
Yes,
There's these auditing
exactly.
companies that are involved. They help take a look at all the data at the ethanol plant. But to your point, they're just running, hey, here's a estimated score from our side because they don't know for certain yet, right? So I'm assuming fairly conservative.
Oh, because they're running January. So now, so
Yeah.
we do it. I mean, all the
Oh, so
facilities
you
are
can do the
working
look
very hard.
back. So you can look back for January through maybe the first two quarters of the year or something like that and have pretty dialed in.
Yeah, those third party verifiers are hard at work. All of them are
Yeah.
hard at work already running and verifying currently, January up until a certain time period. We might schedule it on like, let's look at the first couple quarters at this point. It depends on when you need to deliver the documentation to a
Mhm.
corporate buyer and timelines for how we structure that.
How much of this is there a lot that could still change your faith, right? Because we've got the 45Z CF GREET model now. I'm assuming that's what they're using, but we still don't have all the final guidance and stuff about like, are they going to make any adjustments on those 2025 gallons, or obviously on our side, like, is the feedstock going to be included for 2025? Is there a potential that we're going to have to like reevaluate a lot of this work that's already been done, or like that ship has sailed?
We feel comfortable in doing the work now and transacting. We don't, if there were an updated model that would apply to 2025, then, there could be a scenario where you may generate more of a tax credit,
Yep.
and that's okay, right? Because you can sell it, when you're selling to
Yeah,
a
the
corporate, you're
score's
selling
not
a
going to get
dollar
worse.
value.
Your tax credit
You're
that you develop is probably not going to get smaller. If anything, we're going to end up having more credits to sell. So at least we're not.
And we try to structure our arrangements in which there were, if there's treatment that hasn't been accounted for between a seller and a buyer, we want to be cognizant, we want to plan for that. We don't expect changes, a lot of these changes that we expect with guidance to be effective kind of in January 1 of 26 and forward. But, you can't say anything for sure without
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
We feel, and the market, I think, feels comfortable with transacting. And if all of a sudden you're ending up with generating more in a 45Z value, we try to structure that maybe the buyer has the capacity to take more. We also try to control, as the actual data comes out, that's where it's nice to kind of tranche these in quarterly funding. So you don't ever fund, you wouldn't say, let me purchase 3 years and I'm going to pay you cash now. You can only pay cash consideration once the credit is actually earned.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you're
yeah.
earning
You
it
can't
with the
pay in the
production.
future. It's always got to be
Yes.
look
So
back. You
we
have
can
to know.
plan. We might sell a dollar amount and we may have transactions in which a buyer is committing to purchase 3 years worth of 45Z, which we
Sure.
have. So
Sure.
they'd like to buy the 2025, the 2026 and 27. You could commit to that,
Yeah.
but then you're delivering documentation to verify what that dollar amount is
Yeah.
for each
It's
funding,
something
right?
on contract, right? Just like a farmer. I could price out my crop for future years, but it's when I actually deliver we settle up at that time. Same type of concept. You've got them sold on contract, but you got to deliver them before you actually get paid. But
Yes.
so, and that one of the questions, how often can they do that? Like, is it basically always going to be quarterly or annually? You wouldn't necessarily do it more often than that, would
I
you?
think then it becomes a little administratively heavy for a corporate buyer. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
typically you'd and even for your advisors and for you, like that's a lot of documentation. So and to be able to deliver and turn around a verification or prevailing wage on a monthly is very
Yeah,
tight.
probably a little too aggressive.
So
Because
quarterly
these
is
guys,
probably the
they want
earliest.
to, I think you and I have talked about it before, where any of these deals, you got to have some volume to it. You're not selling, $20,000 worth of tax credit
Right.
at a time. Like
Right.
it's got to be big. You got to have some
Yeah.
volume
Well,
because
the folks who generate these at all, I mean, ethanol's in a position with larger production, on an annual basis where those are sizable tax credits. Our firm sells credits that could range from $1.5 million and up.
yeah,
And typically whether it's RNG or renewable diesel, biodiesel, you're kind of generating in
that's some
something in
sizable.
that range or north. And so it depends on when your projects are coming online. In ethanol, the facilities, this is a long-standing industry, you know, 30, 40 years, what have you. These plants have been around for a long time. On the renewable natural gas side, these developments are more recent, or people are still even constructing anaerobic digesters and doing that work. So relatively newer, the project has to be operational and running. You need to be in an RNG situation, injecting into a pipeline to start to qualify. So some of those projects even come on mid-year, and so they are generating less than 45Zs to start because they haven't been producing for a full
Sure,
year.
sure, sure. But then do they just kind of bank them up for a while? Or I suppose you could still start the negotiations, still start the contracts. Because
Yeah, and we have
is that
corporate
what you're,
buyers. If a corporate buyer has a $3 million tax liability, many are very strategic in planning and still would like to purchase a credit at a discount to offset some of
yeah,
that.
sure, sure. Well, just having their ducks in a row, right? Make sure they got options out there. Are you seeing good interest and uptake from the ethanol plants here now? And what types of ethanol plants, right? Because there's some of the ethanol plants are, basically a co-op or like locally farmer owned type of ethanol plant. Some are corporates are owned by, some are private equity held, some are owned by the big oil and gas guys and stuff. Like, are there certain types that are more eligible and coming to you with more interest?
I mean, if you have a 45Z, if you're in the money and so you have an emissions factor that gets you at a CI range
Yeah, below
to generate
50.
dollars, you're eligible for the credit.
Yep.
Whether you want to sell the credit or utilize the credit for your own to offset your own liability is a decision that each facility would make.
Yeah.
It's important to note, and it's an excellent question in that, so if you have a tax liability, you can utilize the credit. These credits also can be carried back for 3 years and carried forward for 22. So you have the ability to retain the credit and carry it forward if you expect that you might have a tax liability in future years and you'd rather do that. Time value of money is a factor as to when you'd like to receive the cash versus holding on. Some structures are cooperatives, and it's an excellent point. When you have the credit, if you have a pass-through entity,
Mhm.
or when a credit may be allocated down, or there's a pass-through to where
To the
K1s
shareholders.
are issued, when an individual purchases a credit,
Yeah.
that credit can only is treated as passive in nature. So only can offset liabilities generated from passive income.
Got it.
So that is the restriction there. So typically that is why we see corporate buyers as your typical
Mhm.
purchaser of a tax credit because they keep the tax liability there. They've generated it. There's no pass-through scenario.
Yeah.
But
So
these credits are passive for individual folks.
my family is shareholders in our local ethanol co-op, right? Our local ethanol plant. So today they get some pass-through, kickbacks, and then we pay the taxes on the K1s in accordance to that. But we're getting cash from the ethanol plant. So if instead of cash, if they passed the tax credits to us, we would only be able to utilize those credits against passive income, which is
Correct.
weird to me, right? So if a farmer is renting, if it's a old boy farmer, right, that's no longer actively farming, they're renting out their farmland and earning income from that, is that passive income?
So that's where we would say, please work with your own
Okay, yes. All
CPA.
right, good answer.
We are not the
Good answer.
CPAs, but typically is what we say to people is, yeah, if you feel like you're not active in your business anymore, there are specific rules that determine whether you're active or passive in investments that you have or businesses. And you feel like you might be, we say, please talk to your tax advisor
Okay.
and go through your fact pattern to make the determination as to whether income generated from that particular either investment or business would be treated as passive or active. And then we can help you. We do sell tax credits to individuals who have the passive,
Who
passive
qualify
income
for
that they
passive
can
income.
add
Yeah,
on.
sure, sure.
Yes.
Um, but I've only heard a couple ethanol plants talk about passing on the credits to the farmers, and in some cases that maybe I think before we've learned about some of the details, it might have been a good idea, right? Being able to pass along that money directly to the shareholders. They can use the tax credit worth a full dollar versus selling it and only get 92 cents on the dollar, right? So in one side of the coin, it's like, hey, that could be pretty cool. But if you can only use the credits against passive income, those credits for some people they got to pass through, they might be completely worthless, and then nothing really.
Right. Or you'd hold them until and carry them forward
You could
until
carry
you
them
had.
forward,
But,
but then it's
but
just
yeah.
what type of interest are you going to get, and how are you going to get people to participate and share the data, or where's the cash going to come from to do these things that actually lower your CI score if you're not monetize it
Mhm.
somehow, either directly against your own tax liability if you have liability as a biofuel producer, or sell it on the secondary market. There's got to be some cash coming in at some point, I think. So again, I'd heard a couple plants that were kind of thinking that they might want to pass along the credits to the shareholders. That might be the best, and I haven't heard any talk about that here recently. But and that would have to be done, I think, or correct me if I'm wrong. That has to be done at an all or nothing approach. Like you couldn't have a couple of shareholders say, "Hey, pass along the credits to us as a pass through," and the other people say, "No, sell mine." But
There
those
are
people
there
that
are
are interested, they could
individuals
go
who could
buy
do
them.
that.
The
No,
individuals could. You could pass them.
there are facilities who absolutely may be able to take a portion of their 45Z they earn in a year and utilize them
Oh, okay.
for
It's
themselves or
not an all or
shareholders.
nothing.
Yeah, it's not an all or nothing. So
Okay.
you absolutely, and these facilities are, are doing planning and work to assess. Are there some where if we generate them, we can use them? And even if you don't have to sell, it's not an all or nothing. You could say, I'd like to keep a couple $1 million that I'll generate, for shareholders, certain folks who can take them, or I have a liability and I'd like to utilize the 100% of the value. Absolutely. But
Yeah.
I'm going to produce an extra $10 million this year, I don't have an immediate need for, and shareholders may not have that immediate need. So then we would like to sell those. And
Sure.
so you don't have to. These credits can be
Yeah, there's some
split up.
good flexibility there.
Yeah.
Cool. And we kind of answered some of this, but the question on, how are the plants going to comply with the CI scores, and what score is the plant required to be at? The magic number for ethanol is a CI score of 50, and that's kilograms of CO2 equivalent per MMBTU, but then it's rounded, right? So it's not every point below 50. There's a rounding factor where it's every 5 CI points that you reduce gets you in a different bucket, right? That's a little bit different.
You need to be at really a
47 and a half.
47.5 to
Yeah.
start earning 10 cents per gallon. And so there's a range
Yeah.
and that of CI score at 10 cents, and then you'd have to move to another range of CI score to get to the 20 cents and so on. So
Yeah, I've got
the rounding is still there.
Jeff Cooper and the Renewable Fuels Association guys have a great graph on this, but to help explain that, it's if your ethanol plant CI score is a 48, that rounds up to 50, which is not worth anything. If you're at a 47.4, you're below that 47.5 and you round down to a 45, and as long as you meet prevailing wage and registered apprenticeship, that 5 points reduction at 2 cents per point per gallon are now adjust a little bit. That's where the 10 cents comes from. You know?
Yeah, it's not 5 points. It's like 47.5 to a 42.6.
Right, right,
would
right. Yeah, that's how I
be,
should have said. Yeah. So
yeah, or I
between that
guess
range, right? So the
this,
47.4 you would
right?
round down to, or sorry, 40, yes, 47.4 to round down to 45. And also what 42.6 would round up to a 45.
Yep, yep,
So
yep,
it's a
yeah,
bucket, right, where you round to the nearest integer of five or nearest multiple of
yep,
five.
yep,
Um,
exactly.
but so that'll be interesting on like if the feedstock is gonna, or if and when that feedstock is gonna be included, it'll be interesting to see how they factor that in. That the farmers obviously they're looking at the feedstock has a CI score, to a, with digits or with decimal points attached to it, but then it's rounded at the ethanol plant when they actually go in and monetize that. So I think that's important for farmers to be aware of. That was not, I forget when the rounding piece came in. I think that was one of the IRS updates like last summer or something like that. I don't recall.
Yeah.
Um, but at the beginning, it was mostly like, hey, for every point, now this rounding component has been brought in. It's probably going to help clean things up, right? And I would assume on you guys' side too, it's you're when an ethanol plant is trying to figure out what their score is going to be, now you've got kind of a range that as long as you're within this range, the tax credit is the same. So as they're planning and as they're trying to figure out, running their assessments, you've got a 5 point range
Yeah.
that all equates to the same amount of credit.
Yep. So you need to do your modeling, like, considering and contemplating investments, it's how much can this investment that I'm making contribute to a reduction, and whether that gets you to the next band is obviously how you would determine whether or not, economic feasibility, and whether the investment would generate enough return to make it,
To
a
be,
viable investment for the
yeah,
facility.
yeah. And at this point, are so I guess I mean I know a lot of the plants are coming to you guys now. Is that still really a big push, for anybody that's on here today or listening in afterwards? Your ethanol plant needs to be talking with you guys like now, right? Even if is that the case, or do you need to talk to your CPA firm first, make sure you know that you're likely going to qualify or you're going to have some credits to sell, then they talk to you guys, or like, is there an order
It
to that?
depends. Like, we're happy to talk to anyone and help or make, like, yeah, I mean, I think it's good. Everyone should try to understand and assess what they have for a CI score at this point,
Yeah,
and kind of think about and work with those verifiers to determine, even, with the implementation of certain things or changes, what, and all of the facilities and the folks running the ethanol plants and the leadership there are so sophisticated and smart, and they know they are doing that. For everyone has been doing a lot of planning and preparation, and they're obviously focused on their core business of running, their facility, and ensuring excellence in operations. But at the same time, their folks are saying, we have done this work. It's important that and are working on their prevailing wage and apprenticeship. So everyone is doing that. I think the key important thing to note is just how transferability works as everyone is preparing. This is not, you don't have the ability to elect transferability indefinitely. Your ability to transfer a tax credit that is available to you for the tax year that you're in. So whatever credit you've generated on a 45Z
yeah,
in a particular tax year that you're in, not everyone is a calendar year, but to
sure.
keep things simple, when you have the ability to elect to transfer that credit
Yeah,
and close, meaning execute a tax credit purchase agreement, have the closing, receive your cash for the sale of the credit, that has to be done before you
and
and the buyer file your tax return.
yeah, yeah.
If you filed your tax return and you have not elected to transfer the credit or have not sold the credit, you will lose the ability to do so.
That's what scares me, right? In this whole waiting for the rules still. Now, obviously, we don't know how the feedstock is going to be included, or if it's going to be included for 2025 credits, or
Right.
if that's not going to be till 2026. We don't know yet, right? So, meaning
We don't know if ever, really. I
we
mean, we
don't know
just
if ever.
don't
That's a
know.
good point. That's a good point. We don't know. We do know that I do. I know for certain that there are efforts being made to
Working.
ready the data requirements and the auditing requirements for a feedstock to be included. I know that for certain, but I don't know how the IRS rules are going to come out. I don't know if, to your point, I think we know that there's going to be updates to the 45Z CF GREET model. We don't know if feedstock calculator is going to be included in that or what the DOE is going to do. We don't know these things yet. But what scares me in this, right, and why I've continued to really try to get our ducks in a row is if the feedstock is included, which obviously we're seeing folks like Senator Grassley want to see that happen. I know there's a lot of advocating for the feedstock to be included. But we don't know, right? But if it is included, it's going to be a short window between rules coming out and people needing to get their taxes filed, right? And to your point, we got to then gather all this data, get it verified, determine the number of credits, get them brokered so both parties can report them on their taxes before they end up filing them. It could be a lot of stuff in a really short amount of time. But it's also important for farmers to think about there, like your we don't know what's going to happen on your 2024 crop, but this 2025, like if they say no, for 2025 fuel production, we're not going to include feedstock, but 2026 production we will, that would be this crop that we're growing right now. That would still be at play. But we'll see what shapes up here. But it's just, man, it's going to be a lot of work in a short amount of time. And the Department of Energy has a comment period open right now. We've been working a lot of things kind of behind the scenes. We'll be public once we get our comments ready. It's the comment period closes on September 22nd, but the Department of Energy has kind of stepped in to say, hey, we will help run the ethanol plant CI scores. Is that throwing some of this stuff out of whack, or is that going to help? And obviously, we don't know if the DOE is going to have the authority here. It all depends on the IRS, right? But like, is that throwing a wrench in anything, or like not necessarily?
At this point, we just don't know what we don't know. And so we can only operate on what is available to us today.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're operating on and really what the market will transact on. And so they're really, even for planning purposes, I would say, we have the model, the latest model as published.
Mhm.
And so folks and the verifiers, everyone is working from that. And anything in a 45Z market is really kind of based on that and nothing more.
Yeah, yeah. And because there's still like things could still change, is basically do all these credits have to have some insurance policy and stuff behind them? I know there's been talk about having insurance on, tax credit insurance, whatever. Maybe it's just normal. Like, is that a
It
big
really,
thing
there
or
are
not
some
really?
factors that would impact whether you need a tax credit insurance policy. And so typically a tax credit insurance policy will cover kind of the value of that tax credit as long with, if really it's to cover and cover you if in the event the IRS would come in an audit, review that credit and to make a determination as to whether the credit is valid or if a portion or a full amount would be disallowed.
Sure, sure.
And so that's the tax credit policy. There are specific, that if for Section 45Z, it would be a policy to cover a Section 45Z tax credit insurance policy. You need a tax credit insurance policy in a couple ways. One, if the buyer you're selling to just because of their own thesis or their own risk tolerance or profile for why they buy tax credits, they may require it.
Mhm.
But typically, what happens is in any tax credit transaction, no matter what, whether it's a Section 45Z or solar or wind, these credits include in the tax credit purchase agreement indemnification language. So a generator of a tax credit sells and transfers that credit to the buyer.
Mhm.
The seller always says, if something happens with that tax credit where it is not valid or a portion of it is disallowed by the IRS, and
Yep.
it's something that we do or something that we didn't do or something was caused to make it invalid, I will indemnify, I will make you whole.
Yep. Yep.
So that's an indemnification. What is how do you know if an indemnification is strong or if it really would be enforceable? It's your ability as the seller of the tax credit financially to be able to repay the buyer
Yep.
for that tax credit. So indemnification is only as strong as your balance sheet or
Mhm.
your financials. So ethanol plants, great years, been around a long time, conservative, stalwarts of the industry. They typically have strong balance sheets. So then it's up to the ethanol facility. I've got strong
How much
financials.
this
A buyer may
liability?
say, I can look at your financials. I can tell you can indemnify me. Depends on the size of the credit. Is it,
Sure, sure.
$1 million, 12 million, 100? Oh, you could cover and pay me back.
Yeah,
I don't need the insurance. I've reviewed your financials and they're strong.
sure.
Some ethanol facilities may say, even we do have strong financials, but our board and from our appetite and also our risk, we would prefer to not have just this indemnity sitting out there. We'd prefer to purchase a tax credit insurance policy just to make us feel better too. So there's a lot of factors, a lot of reasons why a buyer would need it, and a lot of reasons of why a seller may wish to get it.
Yeah.
But we help on that. We run a whole entire due diligence process. We co-underwrite transactions. We work with the buyer.
Hmm.
If you said, I've got a strong balance sheet, I have no need for that. I do not wish to pay for that. It's quite expensive at this point in time.
Sure.
We will find buyers who, as part of their
Don't
tax
require it.
strategy, are okay with that.
Sure.
Or we'll advise and say, yeah, we looked at we think probably you would need the insurance. We want to make the transaction as simple as possible.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's yeah, the insurance between the ethanol plant and the buyer. I've been in some conversations where okay, if the feedstock is going to be included and farmers are selling some of that data, does the farmer need to basically get the same type of thing, right? So if the farmer is selling data to the ethanol plant and then rules change or whatever, and that data isn't worth as much, does the farmer need to have some type of an insurance deal on it? Now, obviously, it's way too early to tell, but those type of things, just so everyone's aware, just like these guys are talking about insuring the tax credit, we're also talking about is there going to need to be insurance on the CI certificates and on the data? I don't know yet, but very interesting to me as I've tried to figure out how do we make this space work that those type of conversations have come up on the farmer side. Now, I don't think there will be any money moving until we for certain know that that CI certificate is going to be worth something, likely going to need to be, verified, or you're only going to get a small percentage. And you kind of hit on this, right? At the for the ethanol for when you're selling the tax credit, it's at a discount, but you had mentioned like 92 cents on the dollar. Does it range quite a bit or is
Mhm.
it fairly stable?
The range is really based on the size of the credit. So there
Oh, okay.
needs to be enough of a margin,
Yeah,
let's say, or
volume.
a nominal discount for a buyer to make it worth their time. And the market does dictate the pricing. So perception of the risk of the credit. This is a brand new credit. We have to educate the buyers on what this credit is. Many buyers are not the majority who are buying this are not in the biofuel space, so they know very little. They don't know the term carbon intensity score. So there's an education process. They need to be educated as well.
Sure.
So there is a range. It's a 90 to 94% of value type range, I would say safely, depending on the size of your 45Z that you're producing. And also that risk profile. Will you have insurance or a strong indemnity? The less
Some of
strong
the
or lack of
assurances,
insurance, it
yeah.
might be. Mhm.
Some
But
of
I
the
will just say, just to clarify on my end, no requirements on anything for feedstock with
Yep,
insurance. That's not a factor. So there's no policies that talk about that.
yep,
There's
yep.
no diligence with regard to that. That's not a piece of this
Correct.
at this point. And then there's no requirement for payments from any 45Z going back into the supply chain further.
That's
It's a
right.
credit that is only due and owing to be paid to an ethanol facility or any producer of a biofuel.
That's right. That ties into this other question, is how, since the feedstock is not included now at all, right? So everybody at this point, all the ethanol plants just have to use the default number for the feedstock. They can't adjust it.
Mhm.
What are the major things that are generating a CI reduction that they are able to monetize? Obviously, carbon capture for the small
Mhm.
handful of groups that have that, but are there some other things that um, are major drivers
Sure.
today, or what are the factors?
Yeah, so certain investments and projects that can create efficiencies and reduce the use of power, reduce the emissions coming off of the plant. So that's the whole key.
Yeah,
And so, whether that is a combined heat and power or other technologies for efficiencies, how much power do you need to operate the plant? Are you drying more than others? Are you selling what DDGs? Are you employing other technologies? Do you have a solar or wind turbine or anything to do that? You can also purchase RECs or environmental attribute certificates in. So the environmental application from a utility to offset your actual electric purchase of electricity from normal means, you could say it's coming from a clean energy source, purchase those RECs to reduce your carbon intensity score. So those are kind of some key considerations outside of certainly the
It's mostly
sequestration.
right now, right? Those are scope one and scope two type reductions, right? So it's your direct emissions and being able to capture those, sequester them through carbon capture and sequestration, or it's reducing your energy usage as scope two, and your footprint from your energy usage. It's the stuff at the ethanol plant, right? And this is nothing
Right.
new. It's the same type of things that tie into the California market and others like that, I think, right?
Mhm.
Same type.
Mhm.
That's why there's plants that are readily able to do it, and it's fairly straightforward. It's a couple moving parts and fairly known, emissions reductions and stuff, and a relatively simple process. I mean, obviously it's super complex, but like there's a couple moving parts. You get some documentation on those, done. It's versus like, yeah, if the feed, if and when the feedstock is going to be included, it's going to have a lot of moving parts, a lot of individual feedstock CI scores, a lot of individual farmers. And then you got to aggregate that together, right, and get a weighted average or however it's going to be done. And obviously that's what we've been working on. But that's, I think, where there's a lot of still hesitation of why this has taken a long time is it's becoming exponentially more complicated, more moving parts. So, okay, in these things, I mean, a couple of these questions coming in, the answer is we don't know yet, right? So the role of the farmer, from a data and compliance standpoint, I mean, obviously, we all know we've said it multiple times. There's zero integration of the farmer in the feedstock today, zero. Obviously, Continuum is betting very hard that it is the intent of Congress, the intent of the administration to include the feedstock, but we don't know yet. And I see the feedstock as it's a huge contributor to the CI scores today, but we've proven that farmers can lower the score by a lot. We've scored hundreds of millions of bushels and seen an average CI reduction of about 18 points. So I think in a lot of the ethanol plants that I've talked to, they're very excited about farmers participating. And Faith, you and I had a conversation the other day about one that, some plants are not super excited about a bunch of additional paperwork and some of that. But I've met with a couple of ethanol CEOs recently who are pumped about having the farmers involved and want to get the farmers as much of the money as possible. But there's no money moving today. We don't know when any of that is going to go. But if there is anything for farmers to do today, do you have a message for the farmers or even just anybody else that's on here as we're working towards wrapping up?
I would simply say we just, I can't speak to anything in terms of preparation on, at the farm gate because it's just to me so unclear. That would be more of your area, Mitchell, for
Yeah.
sure. And I would just say at a level of statute, like the statute level and 45Z in code, there are no payments to be
Mhm.
directed at this point, then, well, the code is the code, the statute's the law. And so there is no reference to payments being passed through. And so that obligation does not exist.
Yep.
And so, we know that the model, the low carbon farming standards are something that are being worked on. Just in terms of, and what happens with them, I don't know, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a hold tight, right? And that's unfortunately where things continue to be. And what we've been continuing to tell the farmers is, and our message has been consistent. There's no money flowing today. We don't know if or when anything is going to flow. Again, I'm having a lot of conversations where I know it's the intent of a lot of people to have that included, but it's not today. In the actual words on the page, the feedstock is not included today. So until that changes, there's not going to be money flowing. Indications on my side that we could see some of that later on this year. I don't know. But all the farmer can do, and what I tell them is, I don't know if or when you will get paid, but or what amount, but I know you'll get paid nothing if you don't have data. That's all this boils down to. If there's going to be anything in this, whether it be for the farmer or even for like the electricity companies or the other endeavors that we've been talking about here, it all takes data and proof that you did these things. Same thing if there is an opportunity on the farmer. Um, if there's an opportunity for the farmer inclusion, it's going to take data. And obviously, that's what Continuum Ag is focused on. We've been able to prove that we can collect the farmer data field by field. We can get it through the style of audits that were named in some of the draft guidance, but we don't know yet. So, um, what when we say the feedstock's not included, what exactly do you mean? That's the corn and soybeans. The feedstock is whatever is fed into the system to create the fuel, right? And there's lots of different feedstocks for biofuels. I'm simplifying it, right, from a farmer standpoint to corn and soybeans, but for there's beef tallow and there's used cooking oil and there's lots of other stuff. But what I'm talking about is the corn and soybeans that's going into ethanol and biodiesel. Today, there's not clear rules as to how that should be factored in. That's what we're still continuing to wait for, and why we are advocating so hard with the administration and advocating so hard that the farmer piece should be included. And but it's also why it's kind of a standstill and there's no money moving on the farmer side today, in these programs. But um, do the World Trade Organization rules about market interference affect the opportunity with feedstock? I don't think that has anything to do with World Trade Organization stuff. I'm not sure. You'd have to hit me up on that. Do you have any comment on that one? I don't know anything about that.
I don't know. I don't.
Um, how does the R&D tax credit work for farmer to take advantage of those credits? This is a different deal. Do you guys deal with R&D credits at all?
We do not.
Yeah, we have a CPA firm that we partner with that helps farmers and companies get their R&D tax credits. It was also fixed up with the big beautiful bill. If you want to talk about R&D credits, shoot me a message or talk to any of our folks here at Continuum. We have a partner that we can connect you with, and it's free for all of our TopSoil Connect NCI certification customers. That really, really cool opportunity for the farmers to get compensated for some of their efforts. And it's a big risk, right? Faith on, I was literally just talking to one of our huge farmers right before this. They're out flying on cover crop today, anticipating that hopefully there's something that comes, right? If, and we need some clarity to come sooner rather than later on the farm side. And we're trying to diversify the spread out the risk by helping farmers get R&D tax credits, helping farmers get access to cost share opportunities and other backup carbon programs and whatnot as well that
Mm.
I'm pushing as hard as I can to get the feedstock piece included for 45Z. And obviously, Faith, you've seen that for a long time, but it's not today, and I don't know when it's going to happen. I just want to make sure that farmers were understanding that it takes data, that that data's got to flow through, right, from the farm to the ethanol plant. They got to do all this scoring stuff. They got to go through all the verification stuff Faith was talking about. The CPA firm's got to check off on it. Then it's got to go through this process of getting brokered out. It's got to be reported. There's a lot to this thing. So that's why we got to try to be organized. If the farmer is going to be included here, got to be organized. It's got to be streamlined through. We got to have volume too. But luckily, yeah, I think there are some plants that if things do shape up the way that we're pushing for, this is going to be awesome. But today, all we can do is keep advocating, keep educating ourselves. Faith, I think this has been great on learning, that there's some serious hope in the opportunity at large. Now it's just continuing again to figure out if there's going to be an opportunity for farmers to be able to assist with decarbonizing, and help grow this pie even bigger. So we're going to keep pushing for it. Anyway, we need to jump. Let me see. Do I have any other key slides? Oh yeah, I did. Actually, I've got a thing about R&D tax credits right here. Um, that We if you have questions about the R&D credits, I do think it's a huge opportunity and it is a here and now opportunity. It's very important for farmers to look at this, especially if you're at least 500 acres or more. This is a really, really key opportunity. So you can scan this code, it looks like, or shoot any of us an email. We'll get you connected. But Faith, really appreciate you taking the time here today. Any final thoughts? I know we're at time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always wonderful to participate.
I appreciate it. We'll talk to you very soon. Thanks everybody for hopping on and have a great day. We'll be back with some more webinars and see you at Chit Chat next week here as well. So in the meantime, thanks everyone. We'll see you later.